Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on anxiety and ADHD protocols. I'm Harry Campbell of Biofeedback Resources International, and I'm joined by Dr. Jorge Palacios, and he will be doing the second part of the webinar. I'll just be starting out and then handing it over to him. And we'll leave some time at the end for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to, you can type them in, or at the end, we'll give time where you can unmute and ask your questions. All right, so we'll get started. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen there. And so these are the things that we're going to be talking about: anxiety and ADHD. They're both pretty big problems. And so neurofeedback is something that can be used with that. And just talking a little bit about anxiety, the prevalence of it, 9.4% here, reported by the CDC, children aged 3 to 17, which is almost 6 million have an anxiety disorder. And then about 50% of adults with ADHD also suffer from anxiety disorder. It can cause impairments in social, academic, occupational, and personal functioning. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how sometimes anxiety and ADHD sort of end up coming in contact with each other, or one may be affecting the other. So you have about 9.8% of children, we listed that already here. And according to ADDA, about 80% of adults with ADHD have at least one other mental health disorder. And the ADHD can cause difficulties in attention, impulsivity, hyperactivity, organization, and planning. Some of the problems that people that have anxiety and ADHD would be confronted with would be trouble focusing on tasks, staying organized, being forgetful, misplacing things, feeling restless, unable to relax, interrupting conversations, being unable to wait their turn, feeling nervous. This sounds like a lot of people that I come in contact with on a day-to-day basis. Feeling nervous, tense, and on edge, having a sense of doom or danger, experiencing rapid breathing, fast heart rate, sweating and trembling. And these some of these symptoms actually would make me think about biofeedback, not just neurofeedback. And so often we would use biofeedback as well as neurofeedback with people with some of these symptoms. So of course, with neurofeedback, we're dealing with the brain and the many functions of the brain, and the parts of the brain that we might be interested in working with can depend on what the symptoms are. So we'll get into more detail on some of those things later. Here we have some examples of the different brain waves. And when we talk about EEG, we're dealing with different brainwave frequencies. You have the very fast waves, which are smaller, and then you have the slower waves, and you see as the speed decreases, it's going more towards deeper sleep. The faster waves are going to be more associated with active thinking, and if they are too prevalent, then they would be associated with anxiety. And you see here the frequency bands. Just that the frequency bands here. These are the frequencies or cycles per second that go along with the different brain waves that we talk about. Okay. Now, this is showing an example of one type of image of looking at brainwave activity that would be part of what we would call a brain map recording and reporting based on comparing the activity that we record to a normative database and looking at how close the activity is to what would be considered quote unquote normal or average. And as you get further away from what the average was, it would be indicated by different colors. And so here, this is showing higher than what would be considered average activity in the faster frequencies of beta and high beta. And that is often associated with anxiety. This is another image that is also showing, and in some of these images, the colors that would indicate higher activity will be different based on the legend that goes along with that particular software program. And so here, this would be indicating higher than normal activity in the higher frequencies of beta. And that again would be associated with anxiety. Sometimes people would talk about, use the term busy brain. So this type of analysis can show that there's an excess of electrical power in the beta range, those faster frequencies. And sometimes just looking at the raw EEG, a person who's used to looking at it would be able to see that pattern just in the raw EEG, but being able to use software that compares it to a normative database by age and gender and so on can be helpful in making some of those determinations a little bit more clear. And this activity happened to be in the sensory motor and parietal areas that would reflect that the brain was very busy. And you can think about where a person has difficulty stopping the thoughts that and worry and so on that would come on. Even sometimes when the person closes their eyes, they still would have this going on for an anxious person. So part of what we'd be doing with the neurofeedback is settling down or working to encourage the brain to produce less of those high frequencies, the beta, and possibly train it to increase the alpha activity that would be more associated with relaxation. So I'm going to also show another brain map graph that is going to show excess alpha activity while a person was listening. And so listening would be a time where you would want there to be attention. But you'll see here that there is excess of alpha activity, and especially in this case in the front of the brain, but also here you can see it's throughout the really the front 3/4, you could say, by this. And these would be frequencies that would be in alpha. So alpha is usually seen as something that's good to have, for relaxation, but for attention, it's not necessarily always what we're looking to have a lot of. So this can show a reason that there could be inattention, and so that the goal of the neurofeedback would be to train those areas to help the person to decrease that activity and improve their ability to attend. You can often see patterns that would go along with anxiety in the brainwave activity, like I showed in those maps. But also you can, as it was mentioned earlier, you can see sometimes in the raw EEG similar patterns, just not with the nice colored maps. But here you could see these areas that are marked would be the parietal and occipital, and these are very small waves that would be beta. And this person actually had their eyes closed. Usually when a person closes their eyes, they have alpha in those areas. And it was show the next screen here. You can see these are the areas where there's alpha. Those bigger waves would be alpha. And in the other graph, when the person had their eyes closed, that didn't increase. And that sometimes will happen when a person has difficulty relaxing. So this particular person was diagnosed with ADHD, and they were prescribed medication, but it didn't help them really. And part of what happened is because the person was anxious, and that may be what was causing their difficulty with attention. And so helping them with the anxiety would have been more useful rather than treating what would normally be done for attention. So by looking at the EEG, you're able to see that this person had excess, have fast frequencies, beta, and the anxiety was probably what was causing them more problems with attention. So with the neurofeedback, we use an instrument connected to a computer. If there's sensors or electrodes connected to the person measuring their brainwave activity, and then the computer is then feeding back information to the person. Their brain gets that information of being rewarded or not being rewarded based on the changes that are happening with the brain activity. And that's the process of neurofeedback. This is showing a child that has EEG wires, and they, in this case, they have something that they're playing with here or focusing on. But the feedback, which we'll talk more about later, can take many forms. You have different forms of visual feedback, forms of audio feedback, games, etc. And so that will signal the person when they're meeting the goals. And we'll talk, Dr. Palacios will talk more about some of the details of how that's done, and also the specific, a little bit more of the specifics of the protocols that we would use. So looking at what we see as dysregulation, and then taking that information and deciding what we want to encourage in terms of changes in the brain activity is what goes into the protocol. So this is, that's my section that I'm going to cover. And we're, of course, going to be touching on some of the different things that we are going to be covering in much more detail in training that we're going to be doing this fall, or is it technically still summer? And September 14th through 17th, I think technically would still be the summer. That's going to be in St. Petersburg, Florida. And we'll there's more information available on that on our website. You can also call my office to get information, or go on the website that's listed here. And this is my contact information. You can feel free to screenshot it if you want, or also I'm going to have the recording of the webinar available that we'll send out to you for attending if you wanted to review it. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Palacios to continue.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Harry. I will start by sharing my screen. For the moment, there is nothing there, but now you will see some slides that I have prepared for today. Yes, we are in this seminar, this neurofeedback seminar. This is going to be on St. Petersburg in Florida from September 14 to 17 this year. This is one of our many seminars that we have conducted in Florida. for one. This is the first one we are going to offer here in in St. Petersburg, or also very well known as St. Pete by the locals. Let me tell everybody that I am a little bit inspired because I have the privilege to attend online to the Nobel Prize Summit. The Nobel Prize Summit was, it is almost finishing right now. It was held from May 24 to May 26 with this motto, truth, trust, and hope. And one of the most important concerns for all the scientists gathered there was how do we manage to get more trust and to inspire more hope into the people in general. How can we manage to communicate more about our work, about the work in science? This was a very interesting meeting, and let me tell you that I was not only grateful for the invitation, but also excited, but also concerned. And one of my concern was that there was a lot of scientists, physicists, biochemists, biologists, physicians in general, peace Nobel Prizes, but there were few neuroscientists. In fact, I didn't saw anybody. So since the beginning, Harry and I have been very worried about communication of science, and in our seminars, we have had that concern in mind all the time. Not only to train our students, but also to inspire in them the commitment of a profession that has to be practiced almost daily and has to be in mind with the very important idea of have the most important elements of science being applied in order to achieve the wellness of our clients and the personal development of our students. So speaking about this seminar, which also will be inspired about this type of concepts, let me talk with you about these new elements that we have considered for this seminar. First of all, we are planning to have more information about the advances in brain mapping, in quantitative EEG, and we have also the concerns to have more information related to what is known as HD QEEG, also QEEG, high-density QEEG, or high-density electroencephalography. That means that we are going to work with more than the traditional 19 channels of the regular EEG practice. And this is really important if we are talking not only about anxiety and ADHD, but also the fundamentals of neurofeedback, the development of future neurofeedback techniques, and the imminent arrival of AI procedures, techniques, and algorithms into this field. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of information to share with you in this seminar. Let me talk to you about this element that you are looking in the screen, which are the neurophysiological markers. Neurophysiological markers in health and illness. These are the key elements for the work we do in neurofeedback, but also for the current work in neurophysiology and in brain mapping. Neurophysiological markers are a specific arrangement, we can call it that way, in a specific way in which brain waves are organized. And this organization is always related to specific responses to external or internal events, to external stimuli, to cognition, to physiological states or physiological conditions. There have been described many neurophysiological markers since the beginning. In fact, since the beginning, Hans Berger started with neurophysiology, with electroencephalography, describing the most known neurophysiological marker, which is the alpha wave activity. That was the first neurophysiological marker ever described, and it was done by the creator of the technique. There are many others neurophysiological markers that are identified in some EEG laboratories, in clinical settings, in cognitive neuroscience laboratories. And let me just mention a few that are related to neurophysiological process, and two important ones that are related to the key topics we are discussing today. For example, it's very well known in the cognition laboratories, in the neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience laboratories, this event-related potential, or ERP, which is called since many years ago P300. And it is very well known because we are talking here about the ERP related to attentional states. In fact, when we pick up and look for event-related potential that are not in the 300 milliseconds span, but are more extended, we are picking up the activity of an attentional deficit. This is the most confident element to understand attention. We also have we have many ERPs, and they are constantly being studied in many laboratories, such as mine also, to try to understand the different ways in which the brain is processing, and well, first of all, sensing and then processing the general information that it's receiving. For example, N1 and P2 ERPs, which are related to visual processing. Also, N170 or N400 that are related to visual processing and semantic comprehension. Two very important ERPs related in the case to learning, reading, and speech disabilities. And in the more extended way of analysis, not in milliseconds, but in seconds. Alpha waves, as I just mentioned before, in these specific areas of the brain, occipitoparietal and anterior parietal, anterior posterior gradient distribution, being awake and with the eyes closed, which is the most important neurophysiological marker of health. If you are working with an EEG recording of any person between 8 to any 8 years of old and any other age, and you are doing this recording with the eyes closed and in a vigilant state, being awake, you are going to see this specific distribution of alpha waves. But if this specific distribution of alpha waves is not present, we are detecting here a health issue, a health problem. We can also find a different type of neurophysiological marker with EEG. For example, the frontal midline theta activity between 6 to 7 hertz. This is related to memory processes. As you can see, it happens to be that the brain is characterizing every activity that is doing, every activity that is performing with a specific kind of neurophysiological marker, with a specific kind of neurophysiological activity, which is a marker of this event, this condition, this process that is happening inside the brain or inside the body. This type of neurophysiological markers are the key element in the work with brain activity. These are the main elements. Let me tell you, I don't have it here in the slides, but in this moment it came to my memory. A recent research work that has been done with AI, specific with machine learning techniques, and it has been found that with the proper algorithms, it can be the gender can be identified from the brainwaves. In other words, you can feed the system with two different types of EEG recordings. It can be raw EEG recordings, or it can be spectral FFT images. And these systems developed for this process can classify the recordings according to the gender. So you feed the system, and at the end, the system is telling you, well, we have here this number of EEG recordings that are to this biological gender, and we have these EEG recordings that are to this other biological gender. And we do not only have that, we can have biometrical IDs, biometrical identification with these systems of machine learning and deep learning algorithms that can identify biometrically the individual through the brainwaves. So neurophysiological markers that started with the identification of the alpha waves in this type of distribution in 1929 have come to these days to this level of sophistication. And what has to be what all this has to be done with anxiety. That, well, Harry and I have a little bit different numbers, but they are almost more or less the same. With this type of prevalence, for example, in the case of anxiety, we can have this amount of cases around the world and around the United States. And what does neurophysiological markers have to do with anxiety and with anxiety management? Well, let me explain myself and let's go to the graphics. Let's go to the recordings. Here you are looking at a classical 19 channels QEEG, and what you are looking here is nothing else but alpha waves activity. These are the alpha traces. As you can see, these have a specific characteristics. They are sinusoidal. They have a specific frequency, and also they have a specific amplitude and a specific amount of energy, and also they are located in a specific part of the brain. These are the frontal and prefrontal electrodes. These are the central electrodes, and these are the parietal, the temporal, and the occipital electrodes. This is what we call in EEG anterior, because it is in the frontal part of the brain, posterior gradient. That it means that the amount of energy of alpha waves increases from the frontal areas to the occipital areas. And good, this is more or less 1 second of recording, and you can found here the specific amount of traces that are characteristic in alpha waves from 8 to 13 hertz, more or less. And you can see in the central areas that there are some traces with a less amount of alpha waves. We can see these recordings with a very different type of organization, but it is almost the same type of activity. If we perform a more specific analysis, we can find a different kind of distribution. We are looking here to different type of electrodes with the eyes open. This is not done with the eyes closed. This is done with the eyes opened. And we are comparing here 2 different types of electrodes that are called homologous electrodes, because they are in homologous sites in the brain. One is, one is in the central part, in the right hemisphere, that is the electrode C4, and this one is in the left part of the brain, in the left hemisphere, which is called the electrode C3. And we have here a very specific kind of neurophysiological marker. This is related to ADHD, not related to anxiety. We're going to see one related to anxiety in a moment, but this one is related to ADHD. In fact, it is related to impulsivity, not only ADHD, but also impulsivity. We're finding here that there is no alpha blocking of with eyes open in this particular electrode. And as you can see here, we have the alpha block. You can check the amplitude of the activity. Here we have 35 microvolts peak to peak, which is the complete measure of the activity from one peak of the wave to the next one, with the main voltage and the mean, and we can see the difference here with more beta activity, not the ideal, but more beta activity than the alpha. So this is called, here we have a lot of neurophysiological markers, but neurophysiological markers of disease, of illness, of child developmental disorder, which is ADHD. This is called, first of all, asymmetry, because we have some specific voltage in one part of the brain, and we have a different kind of voltage in the other part of the brain at the same time, in the same recording, in the same condition. This is called asymmetry. But not only we have asymmetry, we also have a specific kind of asymmetry. This is another neurophysiological marker. This neurophysiological marker with a little bit of slow waves here is the typical neurophysiological marker of impulsivity behavior. Because in this area of the brain, between C4 and P6 electrodes, which is the sensory motor zone in the brain, in the right hemisphere, it happens to be the place when a different type of activity takes place in order to organize the process, the internal process of self-regulation and inhibition of impulsive behavior. This is the typical recording of a person with impulsivity problems. Let's take a look at another type of neurophysiological marker. This neurophysiological marker is a typical neurophysiological marker of being awake with the eyes open and with the absence of alpha waves that Harry already said, and I already said also, they are a health marker with the eyes closed, but with the eyes open and with a different part of the in the different part of the brain and with asymmetry in the voltage. There is no marker of illness, but a marker of health, but of illness. Well, here we are looking at the regular markers of health with the eyes open. So we can compare the recordings of person with normal health states and with impulsivity. Let's take another look of a different type of analysis. Here we are looking at a very a specific image that I like very much. This is from our laboratory using a software from UCSD. This software was created by Scott McKay and Delorme, and this is called EEG Lab. And here we are looking at the very nice distribution of alpha traces in the occipital zone, but also we can identify a little bit of activity of the midline frontal midline theta activity, and also a small activity of beta or fast waves in the frontal zone. So it looks like if we take a look at the brain with more specific tools, we can find the combination of different type of neurophysiological markers. We call this a specific state because the person that was the owner of these brain waves was with the eyes closed, awake, in a resting condition, and with a resting or in a resting state, because the brain was not working in any task. And we can find 3 different types of markers at the same time, in the same brain, in the same moment. Of course, it's a healthy brain. And also it is a HD QEEG recording. We have there 32 channels. No, we have more than the traditional 19 that I just show you. And if we can do certain kind of interpretation, it is not recommended, but we can do it just with the purpose of being a little bit didactic. We can think that this person is memorizing the experience that is living, is healthy, with in the relaxation state, with the prevalence of alpha wave in the natural anterior-posterior distribution, but it is also with some thoughts, and that is why has some activity in the frontal areas with the rapid brainwaves. It's pretty interesting. This can be done thanks to the more advanced neuroinformatic environments. And let me tell you, we are about to develop here in our laboratory the application that was developed for this software for neurofeedback, a very new, different application for neurofeedback for HD, QEEG, and also specific for this type of algorithms to be used to develop a more precise type of neurofeedback. If we already have this done by September, all our students in St. Pete could have a glance to this type of more advanced neurofeedback. Now, let's talk about something that maybe is in your minds. Well, okay, there are neurophysiological markers. There are a lot of neurophysiological markers. Up to date, we can trust EEG. We can have some hope that with EEG, we can solve a lot of problems. But, and it is a great but, how we manage to modify brainwaves. Well, we can do that through neurophysiological plasticity. Let me tell you that the same as today, I have the privilege to assist to that meeting in this week, this meeting about the Nobel Prize that I told you about. I have always, the privilege of first, to be the first one to describe three different types of plasticity, 3 different types of brain plasticity. I did that for my master's degree dissertation. And in that work, I was describing the neurophysiological plasticity, the anatomical plasticity, and the chemical plasticity, the biochemical plasticity, all of them as part of the brain plasticity. Well, neurofeedback is about that. Neurofeedback is about neurophysiological plasticity. Neurofeedback is about working with neurophysiological plasticity. Neurofeedback is about the systematical work of or with neurofeedback plasticity in order to promote the reorganization of the brainwaves. It has been found that we have to be under certain condition to achieve that goal, to achieve that purpose of the reorganization of brainwaves. But the reorganization of brainwaves is taking place in our brains in every moment, all days. If we are alive, neurophysiological plasticity, along with the other plasticities and many more that has to be discovered, are taking place in our brains in order to organize our different life experiences. So we can manage to do or to use the specific arrangement that has been proved to promote the brainwaves of reorganizations in order to induce health, in order to induce wellness, and of course, in order to make these changes more permanent. So, through neurophysiological plasticity, we can manage to modify these. These are not eyes open, but eyes closed. Take a look at these numbers. You just saw the recordings of a normal person with 32 microvolts of alpha. Now you can see this normal person with 9.4 alpha microvolts of alpha activity, peak to peak, against 13.9 peak to peak microvolts of beta activity in the mean value. And the mean of beta activity is higher than the mean of alpha activity. This person is with the eyes closed. This person is not showing alpha peak frequency here in the spectrum. You will learn about more peak frequencies and how we manage to modify this into this. Well, through the systematic use of the neurofeedback tools to reorganize the brain activity. Here you're looking at the recordings of a person that was, you're looking here this red line, because in the software that I use for neurofeedback therapy, when the recording was made during neurofeedback, this red line means that the person was receiving feedback, in this case, to this tracing. So this is the recording that was a piece of the recording taken from a neurofeedback session. Regarding ADHD, I was thinking, well, it has been said many things about ADHD since it was first discovered that with neurofeedback can be managed successfully to modify the symptoms, the most important symptoms of ADHD and of ADD, and also when it was discovered that there was a specific, sorry for this, let me do this correction. Hope there is not too much trouble. Because we are recording now. Now there it is. It was a misspelling there. Sorry for that. Maybe it was because I was in a hurry. We were nearly the time of this webinar, and it has been a busy week for me, as I was telling you before. It was a long way with ADHD and with ADD and neurofeedback. And I was thinking what to tell about this. Well, there are many things to tell about. One of them is this very important neurophysiological marker, which has been approved by FDA since the second half of 2013. For all brain mappings, it was approved by FDA, if I am not mistaken, that the theta-beta ratio, or theta ratio, can be used as a neurophysiological marker in the diagnosis of ADHD and ADD. And there you are looking at more or less specific numbers of the that you can find in the recording. You are going to see a recording in a moment, and you can see the prevalence of slow waves compared with the fast waves in the case of ADHD. That's the reason why the WHO has placed ADHD among the 20 leading causes of disability, because it generates disability, a great amount, a great deal of disability. Let me show you here the different type of derivatives that we use to work with ADHD. You can use 2, 3, 4 of these derivatives, or you can use them all if you are working with. It all depends on the device you are working with. But these are the complete zones that you are working with in these cases of ADD and ADHD. These areas have been identified along the 30 years or more, even nearly 40 years of neurofeedback work with ADD and ADHD. But let's take a look to reality. And here we have reality. This is a case. This is a 12-year-old patient that I just received this week. And let's take a look at the recordings. You can take a look at these recordings, and I am going to describe them. This is the initial analysis. This is done in a very different neuroinformatic environment. This is called Brainstorm from McGill University. This is from Tadel, Valiet et al. In some of our future webinars, you will see the reference for this neuroinformatic environment. There are a lot of algorithms here used to perform the analysis of these recordings. This is an HD QEEG recording, 32 channels. You can see the different types of derivations or derivatives that were used in the left side of the graph. The recording is pretty clean, but it is not the way it was really picked up from the patient. The patient was moving all the time. He was crunching the teeth. He was talking. He was defying not only me, but his mother, because he just was not comfortable there. He was interested, but not comfortable, because he has to be staying still, not moving, not talking, with the eyes closed. Well, this is the recording with the eyes closed, and as you can see, there is a lot of slow waves. These are the typical slow waves, theta waves, that can be found instead in the place of the alpha waves that normally are found with the eyes closed since the 8 years of age. And here in this topogram, you can observe this is not an eye blink, because the recording has been cleaned of eye blinks. So this amount of activity, this amount of distribution of this part of the recording, in which you can observe the amount of slow waves and how they are distributed in the prefrontal area, in the frontal area, in the central area, and in the occipital and the parietal area. This is pretty congruent with the clinical observations of this patient. This is a patient that is very impulsive. He does not have any kind of anticipation of the control of his behavior. He is not able to perform long periods of attention, of a specific attention. He has a lot of learning disabilities, and also a specific reading and speech disabilities. You can see also the concentration of the activity, of the slow activity in the parietal zone, in the sagittal zone. So, as you can see, it seems that these slow waves are in the whole brain, are distributed in the whole brain. Remember that theta waves are mainly during sleep. the second stage of sleep, which is called N2. And then here you have the PSD. This is the spectrum, the power spectrum display. That is the reason why it is called PSD. Here we have one electrode that we are going to have to exclude from the analysis because it was moved from the moment the recording was taking place. It was done with a cup, but it doesn't matter. The patient was moving a lot, so we usually exclude this type of electrodes, but we can perform the analysis on the rest. As you can see, the 10 hertz are more or less here. We have 20 hertz, we have 10 hertz, but the peak frequency is in the theta or the theta range with a part of the delta range. Well, this is going to be a patient that is going to be treated with neurofeedback, with HD QEEG neurofeedback. And this is going to be treated for the neurofeedback, trying to reverse this type of prevalence of slow waves. And we are going to perform the neurofeedback of the most important attention networks in the brain, the dorsal attention network and the ventral attention network. The first one of the general attention, and the second one, the ventral attention network, related to the saliency states. And let's see the same patient with the eyes opened. And it looks there is not too much difference. The same prevalence of theta waves, the same slow waves, and the same ubiquital distribution of the slow waves in more or less the same places that we saw before in the previous recording. Let me show you the previous one. And let me show you this one. Well, thank you very much. This is part of the many topics that we are going to discuss during the seminar in St. Pete, hoping that you will have more trust and more hope in biofeedback as a reliable science in the treatment of different type of illnesses and diseases.
So thank you, Dr. Palacios. I know that we went a little bit over the amount of time that we were going to, so I don't know how much time we have for questions, but if anyone has a question they'd like to ask, we'll see if we can address it. Does anybody have a question? No? Okay. All right. Well, with that, we will end the webinar for now and just look out for announcements of the other webinar topics that we're going to be doing. We're still in May, so we have one in June, July, and then the last one, I believe, is in August. So that should be in the emails that you had gotten, and we'll be sending another one out, and they're also listed on the website. So thank you for attending, and we hope to see you again. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.